welcome. My name is Dr. Selena Pierman, and it is my honor to have you want to spend a little bit of time with me this afternoon. So whether you volunteered to be here or someone said, hey, you should go to this, I am delighted to have you part of the conversation. For those of you who don't know me, I am based out of Waverly, Iowa. We have a team here and just added one more this week, so I'm pretty excited about that. What you'll know from us is that we are known as the Pierman Group, and we have added an additional company, Chameleon Learning Systems, where we are now continuing to grow our services so that we can get more learning opportunities distributed to staff, all times, all locations, all places, when and where we need them. Part of that is also to complement our live on-site programs, virtual and on-demand programs. So we have been doing this full-time, 15 years. I've been in HR operations and training mode for just over 30. Something that I would say we consistently hear from is that we aim to be evidence-based. What's the data say? How do we provide programs that are scalable from 1 to 2 employees on to tens of thousands of employees, and dynamic, always paying attention to what is happening in our organizations. And whether that is on-site, virtual, or on demand, that is what we aim to do. What I will add to that today is that as part of our model in terms of leadership competencies, most of my time is spent in leadership development, but that means leaders at all levels. Whether I am frontline influencing internal or external customers, I'm influencing my team. We are really interested in continuing to provide solutions for building capacity in organizations. And today's topic is one that we kicked off with a series of webinars free to you this fall. And while I have delivered this one before, it's still pretty new, which if you know me well, right, I always get nervous with new material. So thanks for hanging out with me on that. But also just what are some of the emerging conversations? What do we need to be paying attention to in organizations in order to continue to lead the way? So my interest in this is the fact that in our lifetime, we are doing this together, and organizations are a critical fabric of our life today. We are born in, often educated by, or at least supported with organizations. We are educated by, working in, or customers of organizations. And at that other end of wherever our lifespan takes us, we are also, again, cared for by organizations throughout the lifespan. When you look at our communities, organizations are what give us the social fabric to be able to do and enjoy what we can. So what does that mean for us today as we look at what are the competencies for not only leaders to be clear on where they're going, but flexible in how they get there? To help leaders make and remake organizations, conversations need to happen at all levels, growing capacities in all employees. How does that bring us to this conversation today? In May, Dr. Murthy and the team at the U.S. Surgeon General's office released a report about their concerns based on the data and some really good research about an epidemic of loneliness and isolation. And while many of those demographic trends were happening pre-2020, it doesn't take much consideration for us to understand how everything at 2020 and beyond sped it up. And so I think there's some interesting lessons for us in this material. And because I am fascinated with looking at the data and figuring out how do we help employers take their performance to the next level with and through people, I'm looking at this data specifically related to the business or the organizations that now employ people that are carrying heavy loads with them. So that is the framework where we're coming. I will give you an introduction to some of the key points that I think are helpful from this material, and we'll go from there. We will do a little bit of interaction. So I'm just giving you this as a heads up warning. If you're really quick with your phone, you're going to grab it right now. If you're not that quick with your phone and you want to participate, you'll see the QR code in just a moment. So we're going to do a little bit of online polling. Should you want to participate, those answers you provide are anonymous, but it might just be interesting. And, you know, if the technology gremlins smile on us today, it's going to work. This is not a highly produced webinar. This is me in my conference room with you. And sometimes technology gremlins just, you know, do their thing. And if the poll doesn't work, we're just going to move on. Okay. We're going to come back to that QR code in just a few moments. So let's look at what we're learning about this piece of this set of data in terms of the loneliness and isolation versus connection. We've seen some things even pre-2020 that social networks were getting smaller. Now, that is not your social media platforms, but the amount of close relationships that people have that they count on. And so we see this pattern of social isolation, meaning the time spent alone. We've seen the numbers of close relationships or close friendships drop. And there are a number of demographic shifts that have contributed to this, whether that's single households, declining family sizes, lower marriage rates. We also see this at more risk with marginalized communities. This could include others with poor physical or mental health, right? People with disabilities, financial insecurity, those who are single parents. We also see more, and the Surgeon General documents all of this in their report, of older or younger populations. So it was already in progress and then got pushed. So something I want to pay attention to is what is the impact of this social disconnection then within organizations? Now, while most of the time I focus on employment and that basis, we do see it coming up in communities with volunteerism and serving on boards. And I think there's a really interesting conversation that we could have within civic engagement and what that looks like. But it is also calling for some increased awareness around finding ways to connect in ways that we never had to consider before. So let's look at a little bit more of what that means for us today. If we take loneliness, by definition, it's really a complex emotional response to perceived isolation or lack of social connection. Loneliness is more about the quality of social interactions and relationships rather than their quantity. So we see this with connection, that it can happen different kinds of ways. So it's not about the quantity, it's about the quality of those connections. So loneliness, that makes sense, right? It is extremely subjective and it varies so much from one person to another. So maybe your goal for taking on this time with me this afternoon is just to raise your awareness. And one of those points could be that the way we experience loneliness is really different person to person. It is like other things that I work with in terms of companies when I listen, learn, lead conversations within companies literally every day. This morning, I was at a manufacturing facility in Southern Iowa, and this afternoon, I'm here back with you. But every single day, having these conversations around stress, around change and resilience. Well, I'm going to add loneliness to that list. It is one of the most personal experiences you have. And it isn't the same person to person. It's not even the same today to tomorrow, because again, it's a highly individualized process. What we also see are there are different kinds of loneliness. It could be that it's social loneliness in terms of lack of or missing a network or a group, right, of who I connect with socially. It might be emotional. So it's the absence of close emotional attachment, or it's existential. And that's really a lack of wider connection to the world around me. Whatever you define that world to be, doesn't have to be the whole globe and 8.11 billion people, whatever that number is right now. But it's just that connection between you and and how you interact with the world around you and how you feel your place in that. We also see a difference between short-term and chronic loneliness. So if this is a stage and phase, if you will, that there's something going on right now that is increasing loneliness, or it's something that lasts longer than that. There are some factors that can contribute to loneliness, including personal, situation, and societal factors. Personal factors could include from low self-esteem to social anxiety and many, many more things, right? It is all part of just who we are and how we might be feeling it. Situational factors could encompass just some life events like bereavement or moving to a new city. And while I'm generally sharing what we look at here, then I start tying it to employers. What about moving to a new city and losing your social network? So now they're more at a distance. And for any of us who've moved to a new location and had to acclimate there, we used to say it takes you about a year. And now more and more, we're looking at 2 to 3 years to really get connected into your community. We also see other types of societal factors could include the breakdown of community structures. We're seeing this with changes within, for example, faith-based organizations, where we just aren't connected in the same way to what had been maybe family reunions or places of worship, right? Whatever that might be for some. We certainly, and it's not going to be any surprise to anyone here, on increased reliance on technology at the expense of face-to-face interactions. So let's take a look at this for a moment. We're going to try and see. I've done this live before, but you just never know. So if you want to play along with me, here's the question. I see evidence of loneliness in the workplace. So let's start moving this conversation into, how does this now show up at work? What would that look like to you? Oh, I'm so glad this is working. See, you just have to be willing to put yourself out there sometimes and try it. So I love that we've got some folks chiming in here. Feel free to do that. We're going to give it another 60 seconds to see where we land. So we're at a 4 right now, that 3, right? Somebody maybe not seeing as much. Yeah. And so I look for pockets of when that is showing up. It could be, again, life and stage and phase of what's going on. It might be circumstantial, where there's been a loss in a relationship. We also are seeing the impact of hybrid versus on-site versus fully remote. I had a client not too long ago look at me and said, so what do I do? This person never leaves their house. They're on our team. They're working fully remote. They have everything delivered to them. And I don't think they're leaving their house at all, not even for other kinds of things. And so I'm really interested in how that is now rolling over to leadership conversations about how we do this and how do we connect. I am proposing to you today, as we increase our awareness of this, and I really encourage you to do an internet search, pull up the U.S. Surgeon General's report from May, and have some conversations on our team about, where's this showing up at work? When might I feel it? When might you feel it? And what is the implication of that? The goal is here not to get rid of loneliness. I don't think that is the conversation we should be having. What I want us to be looking at is, okay, given the last couple of years, how do we as an employer, how do we as a leadership team need to respond to our workforce in better, healthier ways to bring them along, informing where we'll go in a moment with connection? So that looks to be where our poll ended up, and we're at about 50-ish people in here right now. So about 52 people who have checked in this afternoon. Just to give you a quick visual from our random sampling of folks who signed up, all usually kind of 1 or 2 degrees away from Salina and Iowa. That's what I see in our participation list today. Let's take on one more. I'm going to ask you to think about ways that it impacts our work. So how does loneliness impact our work? This is going to be a word cloud. So we're going to try one more, because I'm brave, and we're going to try things. So I am not editing these. So please Please keep any comments classroom appropriate. And we got some people typing. So what are some ways that loneliness impacts our work? So lack of trust through the organization. Maybe I start isolating, right? Now I'm too quiet and I'm less communicative. Maybe I'm not as productive because again, I may be feeling like I'm carrying this weight. I start disengaging. And we've had some of those conversations where people are actively engaged, right? Are putting emotional effort into their work, but people are sitting in the middle, maybe disengaged or actively disengaged, right? Disengaged is that removal. Yeah. Decreased job satisfaction, moody, distracted, misunderstandings, not dependable. Oh, thank you for participating in that. We'll give it another minute here to see what shows up. What is that for you? How might this be showing up? Yeah. Unwilling to meet face to face. Thank you. Appearance, increased sick leave use. So part of this raised awareness today is, I wonder what that's about. I wonder what that could be. I wonder what might be causing that. And in many of our employed situations, we may have an EAP, an employee assistance program. We may not. You might be the HR manager who is being told something's going on. And while this is part of a wider conversation around mental health and raising the awareness and continuing to smash some stigmas about the whole person walks in, that we need to be able to work through these, maybe today you just hadn't thought about it as loneliness. What might that look like? Thank you for participating in that. So let's dig a little bit more. So what does connection then mean to us? Let's add that in. So we've defined loneliness. Connection is really the context, within the context of human relationships and psychology, is a sense of belonging and attachment to others. It is some link. And we see this not only with, it could be in our household, it could be with people we spend time with, it could be people outside of our household, outside of our community, or simply online, right? We see this in the workplace. Lots of different ways that we form connection. People we've known, people we know today, and how we might meet people in the future. Connection, if you look at the data on it, really has a biological basis. And there are great research pieces that remind us that forming the appropriate amount of connection for who you are and how you're wired increases emotional well-being. There is an element to this. And again, people need different amounts. So don't misunderstand that this afternoon. What you need and what you need are different than what I need, and so forth. But connection can give us this affirmation of existence. It can provide safety and security. And that's one area that I keep seeing show up within the workplace, especially when we talk about multiple barriers to employment and what is our safety net in the employed relationship when we have to drive further. I'm gonna, those of you who don't know me yet, I have a weird sense of humor. So that just shows up anyways, right? So I hear that, and I'm gonna say this with the humor, but it's a very serious topic. I am now old enough to remember when I could leave a sick child at school or daycare, right? That doesn't happen anymore. So think about safety and security, just that ability to have connections of somebody to call when I need help or somebody around me needs help. Connection also gives us personal growth. Some of you on this call today have been instrumental and supportive and huge parts of my own personal and professional growth. You have been able to give me candid feedback when I needed it. You've been able to give me a good swift push when I've needed it, right? So connection is important for those. It's also part of how we continue to form and reform our identity and our sense of belonging, as well as finding meaning and purpose into activities, into life overall. It is an interesting part of our social function, has been connected, and the Surgeon General's report connects it quite a bit to physical health, cultural and societal implications. If we don't connect, right? How do we do the things we need to do within our communities, across our regions, and so forth? Certainly is a part of health and well-being around intimacy, as well as we see it show up in empathy and compassion. So social connection really reminds us that humans are wired for it. It improves the health and well-being for all individuals, and it's vital to community health and success. What we also know about our traditional employment model, and I'm going to break that in just a moment, but employment overall has given us a social structure. It gives us a time to get up and a time to sleep. It gives us tasks and identity, not that we need traditional employment to gain identity, but it does give us some structure, what I like to call scaffolding, as part of our daily, right? A task, a purpose, a focus. Doesn't have to be, but it is certainly the fabric of earning a living for many of us, not all of us. Now, what we're seeing is some of the employment models be rewritten. Meet me back 15 years from now. Maybe we should just all get together and I'll buy lunch, okay? And we are going to be rewriting what employment looks like and how organizations shape and reshape around new ways to work. So I think this is just the beginning of our next chapter around how we form and reform social connection in a technology-driven, 24/7, 365-day-a-year world. The lack of, though, shows up. So when we don't have connection, we see it within social support systems. I say this with love for many people. As a grown-up preacher's daughter who spent my life in and around churches and faith-based communities, I look at serving a funeral lunch for 25 people, 100 people, 200 people, and just how ingrained that was to me, that when somebody has a loss, you show up and you take care of that day for them. And as somebody who has lost both of my parents, how important that time is. That's one example of a social support system that I look at it now and say, for all of us working, who's going to fix the funeral lunch, right? And it's not as simple as that, but those are the kinds of examples that we're going to have to work through as we shape and reshape the community fabric. I also see this, and to all of you working on behalf of public entities today, I just marveled at the attendee list of who signed up for today. Thank you. And I'm just going to say thank you to all of our counties in Iowa for doing the work you do. So whether you're at the city level, the county level, we have a lot of county folks with us today, and at the state level, public organizations are seeing this show up in other ways, whether it's in our libraries, whether it's in our county offices of general public, right? Showing up, needing services, and you may be seeing the lonely ripple effect. That might be longer conversations, that might be more trips to see you so that there's another way to connect. We just see many, many ways that show up, and you know that better than I do. I spend a lot of time out in the counties, but you live this every day. And I want you to think about maybe a conversation you can have with your team around you to say, how can we continue to respond? What does that look like? And then certainly we see this with how teamwork develops within employers. Whether we're all on site, hybrid, or remote. I had a conversation with a college president not too long ago who mentioned that we're preparing students for dual tracks, going to an office or a place of work and working, or possibly within some professions, never. So what does that look like in our homes? When I graduate, I go to work and I've never left my own residence to do that. We've got some challenges there. So now what we're seeing as an employer is it's taking everything we knew we should be doing well and kicking it up a level. We are going to have to communicate even that much more effectively. We're going to have to check in, right, and do more to offset this connection, loneliness, and what I want to take it back today to is the need for relationships. So I did pull one data point because I think this is an interesting piece where we see, right, traditional community building institutions were in steep decline at a time when we need relationships more than ever. So I think that the research around following number of close friends, not counting relatives, from 1990 to 2021, right? We do not have the same kinds of relationships we had before, right? We don't have as many of them. And it's something for us to think about, because now what we would have said years ago is that we have some work friends and we have some maybe school friends, or we have our social friends. But again, even though we are more technologically connected, those numbers are shifting. So there are some very clear recommendations that the Surgeon General's office made in general and about workplaces. So I want to hit on a few of those. And because this is the work I do every day within companies, as an organizational psychologist, I'm going to put my own spin on it and give you some additional things to think about. And while we can't cover it all today, I am yours. You're part of my network. If there's something that would be helpful for you, if there's a follow-up conversation, if there's materials you're looking for, I'll do whatever I can do to make that happen. So Surgeon General, it's a fantastic 80-page report, right? There's a ton in there, including huge data points and recommendations. So making social connection a priority. Here is what I hear from exhausted leaders. Oh, really? Now we got to help everybody be friends. Okay, catch the humor in my voice, but all the seriousness that goes with that. Yeah. What happens when we have a workforce that comes to the workplace without the skills? We train them. We develop a pipeline of potential employees to increase skills to do the work we need to do within our organizations. We have, at all ages, by the way, different levels of abilities to form and keep connection. So we need to train, resource, and empower leaders to implement and improve connection in the workplace. We need to leverage programs we have to educate the workforce on the importance of socialization. Has a conversation happened with that employee who is isolating, who doesn't respond much, to say, hey, I care enough to say something. What's up? Because here's what it may be. It may be loneliness, or it just may be a lack of skill set because they've never been shown, modeled, or supported in creating other connections. Creating a culture that fosters inclusion and belonging. We have had some really good discussion in recent years, not only about diversity and equity and inclusion, but we've added belonging. And what I have come to see with new insight is if I feel included, that's a space to be. But if I feel like I belong, that's a stronger connection. So we need to look at what types of policies protect workers' ability to nurture relationships outside of the work while respecting work and non-work boundaries. So that came out of the Surgeon General's. And, many of you know, I still am active in HR. I still do support for a couple of organizations and sometimes refer to myself as a recovering HR director, right? What does that look like in this space to encourage employees, right, to create meaningful connections? Considering opportunities and challenges and challenge work arrangements pose to workers' abilities to connect. So opportunities and challenges. So that would be remote. That would be people coming in on different days and shared spaces. So I see this within organizations where some people never have left the workplace. They're there full-time, going full force. And then we have this modified version of maybe we have a mix. And the most common pattern I'm seeing there are anchor days. And anchor days are when everybody gets together, or anchor events are when everybody comes together. And then remote. We have new options, and we do need to understand that that's going to help us shape and reshape some organizations. But we have to look at our business model, whatever combination that is for you, and understand of how do people connect? What does that look like? In organizations right now, one of my most common conversations is around, I just don't even know who to ask. I'm new, or I've been around a while, and I don't know if I ask you that question, or do I ask you that question? Or so we need to help people on board, and then in their positions, have conversations around who do you connect with for what. And that's just not new people. That is defining and redefining it for everybody, because we are team of teams continuously collaborating and re-collaborating across different teams. So if I look at those from the Surgeon General, there's probably not a whole lot there, just given the workplace and the experience that I know is in this call today. Not even just by years, right? But awareness. We've got some new professionals on the call today that are seeing these things and trying to figure out how they navigate it. We got some of us who've been around a while, and we're like, that names it. I've been seeing this. I wasn't sure what it was called. Now you can increase your own situational awareness to what that looks like. So loneliness and disconnection can affect employee well-being and productivity. These are some things that I look at when I'm in conversation with leaders and organizations, or I'm in training mode, whether that's, again, on site, virtual, or on demand. We know that there is power in vulnerability and opening up communication lines. I didn't know. I felt that way. Tell me, or would you share with me what questions you have or what you're going through, right? It is opening up that communication to do a little bit more sharing. And we have different levels of sharing. We could spend just hours alone on that, right? Some of us disclose lots, some of us don't disclose much. But creating an environment where we can create conversation around, here's what I'm experiencing, what are you? It helps us feel more connected. Leaders, we got to up our game. I've been saying that for a long time, except now we got to do it even more. As we remake organizations, as we look at this, I know you're tired, but this is the weight we can carry. And we need to do regular check-ins with our teams. I was at an organization just recently where they said, I don't have time. I'm like, someone tell them hi. If you need to start with telling them hi at the beginning of shift, then start there. If you need to start with greeting each person and wishing them a great night when they leave, whatever hour that is on their shift, then start there. We have to check in with people. While I recognize team building activities are not everybody's favorite, we learn something, we do something together. And these don't take long. They don't have to be hours and hours. They can be 5 minutes. They can be 2 minutes at a pre-shift huddle. They can be 10 minutes at a regular staff meeting. We need to do something that allows people to connect in a way as humans. Anchor days I mentioned, and hybrid options where we just all know at that event or on that day we show up. We see the importance of promoting mental health and raising awareness about remaining and strengthening our mental health. I am seeing more and more around mentoring and buddy systems. Again, if I am less skilled in forming relationships, then give me some structure and some expectations around what that mentoring or buddy system may be. Collaboration tools are giving us more and more options, especially as we are geographically dispersed. Maybe you have multiple locations and we need to be able to help people share ideas. And so this is your teams. This is all the different types of technology tools we have. Too many can be overwhelming. Find the right ones and use them well. I do want to note just changing customer practices too. So you may have an employee frontline who is feeling more overwhelmed because they're spending longer times on customer interactions, and then they're feeling more strained in getting other types of work done. Just having a conversation about that may help them navigate it better. We do see opportunities with encouraging breaks. Here's our challenge. People go on break and they go on their phone, or they sit in their car, and we all need that break. Like, I need a break from people. That's important. But we also need that rest. So there are opportunities there to talk about taking the break that means that you need. Do you need to be with people, or do you need to be alone? And the challenge of constant scrolling. Everybody goes to a break room and all sits on their phone, not what we used to do. Something though, again, their break time is their break time, but we need to encourage them to take breaks because actually then we're healthier and more productive. Community involvement continues to be an area that we're seeing, volunteerism, opportunities for people to participate. Again, it helps with that feeling part of something bigger than me, helps us feel less lonely. Celebrating milestones, what we celebrate, we become. Sometimes we just need that little boost. Maybe a celebration it doesn't seem worth it to somebody else, but sometimes for people, that's the boost we need. The lack of information, though, helps, or the lack of information makes us feel more disconnected. So feedback loops are really important in terms of closing conversations, following up, doing what I say I'm going to do, because again, I don't feel left out. Little something from me, when I go into a company, one of the things I look for, I don't say this out loud very often, so don't tell anybody, okay? No, one of the things I look for is who feels left out. Who do we just keep forgetting? Who gets left off the emails? Who do we forget to tell about a special project? If you're raising your hand right now, see me after class, okay? I'm sorry. There's just such an opportunity there for us to pay attention to who gets left out. And that becomes really important when they're not visible. If they're working remotely or at another location and they're not visible, we have to work that much harder at it. Affinity groups would be common interest groups where we can support. There is an opportunity to connect with people like me. And that helps us grow connections that raise our confidence, raise our sense of belonging for us to go then interact with other groups. Training and workshops, certainly one of my favorites. Transparent leadership. Transparent leadership for us may sound something like there are days my team needs to see me motivating them, cheerleading us, moving us forward, and positive, right? Because if we believe it, right, if we don't see the future possibilities, everybody else will believe us. So we see the future possibilities. But there are other moments I need to show up real, like I'm struggling with this, like I messed that up. And so leader vulnerability in this and transparency is really important because for us to form connections, sometimes connection is admitting I messed that up royally, or I'm really struggling today. And to let my staff be supportive of me, just like I want to be for them every other time. We do see some connection of just improving physical workspace so that people can take a break, that people have access to what they need. It's another strategy we're seeing in terms of so that people feel supported, right? So when we think about being proactive in a culture that prioritizes, right, connection, inclusivity, when we show that we care about the well-being of employees, it fosters a greater sense of belonging. It reduces feelings of isolation, and we stay. People stay where people are cared about. If you checked in with us at our last webinar, that was one of our central themes around empathy. So consider today, for this investment of time, hanging out with me on this video or on live Zoom this afternoon, what actions can you commit to? If you can look around you and increase your situational awareness to be that much more tuned in to who's feeling left out, maybe what skills do we need to teach in order to create better relationships? What can we do to adjust to the social relationships and how they are shifting on the job? Okay, so we have a couple of last things to wrap up here. One, let me tell you a coaching technique that I love. And maybe this is your goal coming out of today. I want you to name 5 key relationships you count on to be effective in your role. 5 key relationships you count on. What are you investing into those? Because while we want to reduce loneliness, increase connection, we need to take care of the relationships we have. Sometimes in our personal lives, too much time can pass before we reach out and reconnect with someone. Same thing goes at work. Now, while we could talk about all those personal ones too, my focus is how we do this better at work. 5 key relationships. And if you say, Selena, 5's too many, pick 1 or 2. That's fine. Don't pick 14, too many to work on. Maybe for you today, it's to raise your awareness. Look around you. Who might be struggling and how could you reach out? Or maybe today your commitment is to strengthen the relationships you count on so you can rely on them and they can rely on you when you need it.